So now let's take a closer look at one of the top stories of the week. And this week we're looking at antitrust. The US Department of Justice is looking at two big IT companies potentially making waves for the enterprise IT space. First, they're asking a federal judge to force Google to sell or spin off the Chrome browser, arguing that the integration with Google's other products, particularly Android, Search, and the Play Store, is anti competitive. They're also looking at the proposed acquisition of Juniper Networks by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and potentially scuttling that deal as well. Now, here in the US, there's been a lot of thoughts about the incoming administration and cabinet picks and so on, but maybe that hasn't spread outside our shores. First, Alistair, what can you tell us about Google and Chrome?
So the point here is that Google is huge. Google has a massive footprint around the world on pretty much almost every computer that you use. Certainly every one I use because it's my default browser. But I also have Google as my default search engine. I have an Android phone, and so I'm very much hooked into the Google world. And Google's use of the data that it's collecting from me and its algorithms together can very much drive my perception of the world around me. And that's fundamentally what this is about, is separating some of that out, allowing a bit wider input into that set of information that's presented to me, but also allowing other organizations to compete more fairly in here. Even though I might continue to use Chrome everywhere, I might not just get Google's view of the world. And I think as we're seeing political changes, not just in your country, but also here in mine, the ability to see wider views of what's going on in the world is fairly significant. We will have seen that the international news about our hikoi here to protect Indigenous rights. And the ability to see this information unfettered and uncontrolled is really important to us. The other one that was interesting was seeing the Juniper deal getting. As I read the story, I wasn't clear whether the Department of Justice has said they're actually trying to block this thing or whether it was just rumors going around that were causing uncertainty and therefore problems with stock prices moving. It is interesting that the Department of Justice is who does this for you in the US, and the rest of the world's kind of gotten used to this. We remember the days of Microsoft and Netscape, and the antitrust kind of elements that went along around the browser wars in the past. But just justice seems to be an interesting place for this. Is this just the way the US lawmaking and jurisdictions fall together, Stephen?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, this is how it falls in there. I mean, it's important to recognize that we don't have something like the Digital Markets Act that they have in Europe. We have long-standing antitrust laws dating way back to the early parts of the 20th century, and some of them actually dating earlier than that to the railroads and things like that. But it's also important to recognize that here in the U.S. Number one, obviously, the US has a lot of power in these types of enforcements because many of these companies are based here. And of course, we're a large market. But number two, that it is very much up to, I don't want to say the whims, but up to the decisions of the people in the current administration, how things are enforced. Now, part of it happens from the Department of Justice at the direction of the Attorney General, who decides which cases the nation's law enforcement should look into, which cases they should try to argue in court, and which cases and what remedies that they should put forward. But part of it all is also in the hands of the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. Now, Biden's FTC commissioner has actually drawn a lot of fire because she has been extremely aggressive in antitrust action. In fact, Lena Khan is her name. She has kind of a bad name among business people and probably among the Republican elite because she has been so aggressive. Essentially, the Biden administration literally, I mean, they signed an executive order basically saying big is bad and we should go after big. And that's pretty much what Lena Khan has done at the FTC. Now, the Department of Justice has also looked into a lot of mergers and so on and has decided to allow some and block others. But the Google case, I think, is really interesting because essentially this is a long running case. It spans multiple administrations. And the result, well, to my mind, it makes absolutely no sense. Chrome doesn't really have any value as a standalone product. Otherwise, we would have a vibrant economy of web browsers out there. And ask, I guess, the Opera people or the Firefox people if that's true. The truth is, there really isn't a market for browsers, and it's not really clear who would want this thing other than Google. Uh, the whole case, though, was supposed to be attacking Android and Play Store and things like that, not to mention a separate case that is looking at Google's dominance in advertising. So we do have to think about how that would play out in the minds of a new attorney general and a new FTC chair, on the assumption that the Trump administration would quickly change chairs of the FTC as well as the Department of Justice. And then there's the HPE Juniper acquisition, which again, as you mentioned, there's no announcement as far as I can tell. There's no official word here. It's just people are spooked by it. Frankly, I can't see this administration, a lame duck administration, blocking a merger like that unless it was very clear that the new administration wanted to do that. And to my mind, it's not very clear what the new administration wants to do when it comes to antitrust. I should point out that Trump himself, along with many of his top advisors, including J.D. Vance and his nominee for Attorney General, have all been actually quite aggressive and proponents of enforcing antitrust actions and breaking up big companies. It's uh, it's not entirely clear that they would want to take a different approach on this than the Biden administration. But that being said, they'll want to take a different approach to everything than the Biden administration. And so there is a good chance that they may indeed drop some of these cases or modify some of these cases. But ultimately, I don't see a Trump administration as being all that big business friendly. What's your take from your side of the pond?
Well, from over here, we see uh, that there's been a global swing towards the right in the last year or so. Same with our election a year ago. We've seen it in Europe as well. And so you would have expected that to be more business friendly. It certainly has been here in New Zealand. But as you say, whilst Trump himself is tends to be interested in looking after the organizations that he understands, that he knows, that's not necessarily going to flow through into we want more larger organizations. Uh, I really have trouble predicting what the heck is going to happen in your country because things are crazy. It's crazy enough in my country. And I think we will wait with bated breath and see.
Yeah, it's really a strange situation, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you would think that the incoming administration would be extremely business friendly, that they would be really doing anything they can to promote capitalism and big business. But at the same time, I mean, one of Trump's big platforms has been tariffs, and that is extremely business unfriendly. And many of the other things that he's been talking about really do point to aggressive actions against large companies. So, yeah, as you say, we'll see what happens, but I don't think it's all that obvious that these big antitrust cases would go away or that they would be dropped, even if the heads of these organizations were to change.